And here we are.
There you are.
Happy Friday Fun Day has rolled around once again. It's amazing how that just keeps coming week after week after week. It just keeps rolling right around, doesn't it?
Yep. Doesn't get any easier as you get older either. It's like
So
it just disappears. Just it's gone.
it's yeah, it's amazing. Since I've been retired from the man for 8 years now, and I would say that this might be the fastest 8 years of my life. Like, and when I was working for the man, that was school districts and school calendars and all that stuff too. And so that went by really quick, but not as fast. You would think after you stop working for the man that things would slow down a little bit, but no, it seems to have
Yeah.
sped up for
You
some reason.
put a couple kids through undergraduate. At this point, it's like I don't know. It's wild to think, but I was thinking about that too the other day. Uh, I quit. I cut off all W-2 or independent contractor pay in 2018. So so that's right around the same time, I guess, that you would have retired, huh?
Yep, pretty much. Yep, you're right. Yeah, December 31st, 2018 is when.
Yeah, yeah, pretty wild, man. But I was just thinking, like, thinking back, like all the things I did and all the things I can't believe that I did, all the mistakes and all that good stuff. It's just I don't know. I'm in the middle of this rehab right now, and I just have so much time to reflect uh, on this type of stuff because I'm basically just standing there. I'm in working in silence and
Yeah.
just nothing but thoughts. And that was one of the
Yep.
things I thought about this past week. Really interesting. But yeah, I've never made a better decision in my life, though. I'll tell you that. Got you know, I don't know. It's just been I could not imagine not having that freedom now. Not that it's perfect. Not that it's for everybody. Because
Yes, it has its own challenges, that's for sure.
definite ups and downs and I don't know. I kind of thrive in that environment though. I just I'm a very I'm proactive in some things, but I'm very reactive in a lot of other things. And so I tend to I tend to I just have this knack for pulling things kind of out of thin air. I think whenever things go south or what have you, and I just kind of thrive in that, like putting out the fires. I suppose is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. You are pretty good when stuff has to fan. Which brings us to just a logistical thing I like to toss out here. Last week's podcast episode had some kind of glitch in it, and it did not stream or load the entire episode into the YouTube. So we have loaded that episode separately. We just uploaded the full episode onto the YouTube. It's not on the live channel, it's just in their videos, but it is in the podcast list. So if you missed that or you watched it for 10 minutes and thought maybe that there was more to it, indeed there was. So we apologize for that. That's probably Skynet getting back at me for all the shit I talk about it.
That's right. That's right.
So
You
if
got to
you're listening, Skynet,
watch your tongue. That's right.
yeah, that's right.
About it.
That's
It
right.
has feelings, has feelings like the rest of us.
That is it. So that brings us to this week's episode of the Creative Real Estate Investing Mastery podcast. What is our topic for this week, Mr. Goffin?
Well, to this, since probably, I don't know, mid 2025, we have experienced a little bit of a, not I say we, landlords specifically.
The rental market, yeah.
There is a definite uptick in landlords selling their stuff off, and that just I'm not going to get into it in super detail, but that has a lot to do uh, with interest rates and just the economy in general. Just everything's more expensive. Uh, I think we talked about a couple weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer, but we talked about the uh, make readies and how a make ready is just it seems to be like you used to be able to do 2015, 20, even up into 2020. You could do a make ready for you know you could spend as little as 500 to 3,000 bucks on a turnover, on tenant turnover. But that is not the case any longer. Everything's just more expensive, and we're seeing these fuel prices rise. So that's just a trickle down effect. Everything just becomes more expensive. And so, what I thought we'd talk about today is striking gold, quote
Hmm.
gold, in creative finance as it relates to tired landlords. There's a definite market there, and we are going to explore that a little bit today.
Yes, it's a perfect timing.
Kind of perfect storm. Yeah.
Perfect timing for this thing. And we've talked a lot about, just landlords, rental properties in general. Like both of us have had rental properties. You still have a whole rental portfolio that you have with a partner, where
Mhm.
you're the hands-off partner. Like you're not the property management side of all of that.
Right.
But then we talked about why we shifted to our model, where we put buyers in there, right? We don't put tenants. We sell or finance it on the backside on the agreement for deed or a wrap mortgage or whatever, and so that we're not dealing with all the landlord problems. But let's just take a second, not to beat down on landlords too, but let's just refresh ourselves with all the landlord problems that exist today. You mentioned a big one, the interest rates. So typically when you get a commercial loan, you have a rental portfolio, it's a 3-year renewal for that. In other words, your interest rate's locked in for 3 years and then it renews. It renews at whatever the interest rate is. It's not technically an ARM. They just call it a renewal in the commercial lending world, right? And so a lot of that stuff now that is coming due is renewing way higher than it did 3 years ago when they had that rate.
Yeah.
Might be lucky enough. Some of them might have a 5-year renewal rate. I mean, so that's 3 or 5. And so all that stuff's resetting. So that's putting pressure. So the cash flow now is being cut into, right? So your cash flow is coming off the top with your new higher interest rate, right? And then what about all those tenant trash and toilet problems, right? That you get all those calls for, especially if you're managing it yourself. Maybe you have a property manager that does that, like you do with your partners, like still self-managed, but well, I mean, you're still going to get calls,
Yeah.
right? You're still going to get the sump pump stopped working, and we had 3 inches of rain in 47 minutes, like happens here in the Midwest. And guess what? Now you got a foot of water in your basement.
Yep. Yeah. I mean that has actually happened.
Yes, all
That
the time.
happened to me on a flip, as a matter of fact, too. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of variables here. We've got obviously, I'll get it. I could easily get into a tirade about this, but we have this so-called appreciation, which is just inflation. That's all that it is.
Hmm.
So what happens when a home appreciates? Well, guess what? Property taxes go up, uh, insurance goes up,
Yep.
and insurance companies now has to insure a property that's supposedly worth more, and so you just have all of these compounding compounding bills and compounding expenses or expense that and the real problem I think is, and you talked about commercial loans. I want to talk more about the kind of the smaller landlord, and
Yep.
I do think these are the best ones to target.
Yep.
Those are people with 10 properties or less that really have no business being a landlord, because that is a full-time job.
Yep.
Somebody
Yeah.
has 10 properties, they're probably more than likely they still have a W-2, and this is
Yep.
an investment vehicle for them, and they're a lot of them are trapped in this world of where they have to go out and work their W-2, and they also have these ten properties to manage. But the good thing about that for particularly a creative investor is that those loans and those types of folks. This is why I think you should be focusing on these types of people. They don't have those. Their interest rates are a little bit higher because it is an investment property, but they're not doing big commercial loans. Generally speaking, they're not taking their properties, um, bunching them into just like a portfolio loan or a commercial loan. They usually most of the time they generally just have a one loan per property. And so those interest rates are, and those interest rates they can get, they get 20 or 30-year loans for those, and they don't have that renewal problem that we see with commercial lending. So I think targeting, and we had a student in the past that actually brought this to light. He actually tracked it and found that those people that had no more than, from 1 to 5 properties, trying to get into this business, those are the ones that needed the most help. Those were where the deals really stood out. And so we kind of just shifted into that model and just targeting those, I would call them newer investors, and people that really just couldn't manage these things themselves. So yeah, that's where we're at. That's what I think that, now that doesn't exclude some of the commercial stuff, but it's just a little harder to manage because of those renewals. And you have to be super, super careful, because you could just inherit their problem, and that's not where you want to be. So anyway, that's tip number one.
Yes. Can we talk a little bit about how best to market to these people? So you say, so we just gave you a good pro tip there about what to look for. So you want to try to find people that have 10 or fewer properties, right? And target them. But from a marketing standpoint, what would you recommend to specifically find? How am I going to get a list of people that own 10 or less properties, right? How am I going to find that list, Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, there's a couple ways. Number one, I think the very best way to find these folks is through networking. I think that's probably the best way to find a lot of deals, honestly, is networking. It's just the problem. That can be problematic because it does take a long time to build up that network. But once that network is built and you have a name for yourself, I'm not going to say it's easy, but the deals come, and they come unexpectedly. First of all, you just get a call out of the blue one day. But they tend to be the best. They tend to be the best deals. Now, if you don't have that network and you don't have, your phone's not ringing with people offering for you to take their property, subject to, or do some kind of creative financing, then you're probably going to resort to building a list. And however you work that list, whether that's cold calling or mail or door knocking, whatever it is, that list is going to be, or fine tuning that list is going to be super important. So I already mentioned the first little lever to pull, and excuse me, and that's going to be, you're looking for the smaller landlord. So all of your softwares out there that pull lists can do this. You're looking for folks with properties, definitely not greater than 10. I would like to see somewhere between 1 and 5 properties that they own that's associated with their name. It's probably, well, it's not probably, that is your best likelihood of finding a tired landlord, a landlord who wants to sell to you. That would be the ultimate lever to pull. But also you want to look at things like, how long have they owned the property?
Yes. Yep.
Another thing that we've seen is, it's usually, a lot of people tell you to filter for a year or later, but it takes time to build up 1 to 5 properties. And although there is generally not a time limit, I've seen people go out and get financing for 3 properties at a time, and that may be all they own are those 3 properties. But how long have they actually owned the property? So it takes a little bit of time to kind of feel the sting of being a landlord, I think. And so I would say go at the 2-year mark. That's when, so if they've owned that property for 2 years or longer, that would be another good little lever to pull. So we've got how long have they owned the property and how many properties do they own. And then the rest of it is just kind of your own personal feeling on, um, or your own personal requirements. So that would be things like mortgage balance, mortgage interest. Of course, location's always going to matter. Location's going to be super, super important. Things like that, beds, baths, the the physical property itself, um, and I guess location kind of goes along with that too, where it's located. Um, but those little levers like that, the main ones being like I've just said, how long they've owned the property, and um, what was the other thing? How long they've owned the property, and how many properties they
How many total are the first two big ones? First two
those are
big
the
buttons.
two key factors right there. You're looking for motivation. Like, you're not going to go out and talk to somebody who owns. I mean, you can. There may be a landlord out there that's trying to sell off a part of his or her portfolio. It's not, it's not wrong to speak with them. In fact, those people will generally be very knowledgeable about what we're trying to accomplish with creative financing, and they're more apt to be open to the idea of creative financing. So it's not wrong to talk about them. I'm talking about the best deals, and because everyone's targeting absentee owners all the time. It is the most marketed. It is the most common list that people market to is absentee owners. Like, I don't know if you've ever noticed this or not, but you call up, or you uh, place an order, you get on your software to build this list. Almost all of these companies, these list brokers and all these companies, they almost always have a predefined absentee owner like button. Like, you can say order an absentee owners list. It's so common. But what is not common, and a way that you can capitalize on that, is by pulling those levers that I just talked about. And by the way, those levers are those levers give you the best chance for doing a creative deal with one of these landlords. And I would say, talking to these folks, these smaller landlords, it's a little bit tougher, I think, to convert them into some kind of seller financing or creative financing or subject to, simply because those are generally, when you have a portfolio that small, those are generally put into their personal names, and so there's a risk factor there that they look at. Um, so if you can overcome that, if you can kind of get them on board with you, uh, let's just say it's subject to. If you can get them on board with you on subject to, those are going to be the best deals. You're going to get the best interest rates, um, you know, or however you want to acquire it, whether it's through, uh, maybe they're going to wrap it for you, and kind of like what we do with our buyers.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, let's talk about that in
yeah,
just a little more detail. So we find it. So we find we're just going to call them a tired landlord, right? We find a tired landlord. Let's say they have three properties, just as an example. Tired landlord, three properties, owned them for 6 years, ready to get out of the game because three properties. And this would be even better too, as another little sub lever, is if the properties are not in close proximity. I bought one, so talking about our St. Louis metro area, I bought one in South County. I have one over here in West County. I have one over here, right? They're not geographically close, right? Which makes your property management of them even worse, right? But you didn't know that at the time. And so that's an even better thing to have in there.
it's a
But
good point.
to acquire this from them, there's like, we want to be the buyer. We want to make that tired landlord the bank. That is goal number one. We still want them to, the best way to try to go about that is to keep them in the deal as the bank. That's what you want to try to do. So you brought up the sub two, and we have shameless plug for the sub two documents package right there, as well. And if it is in their personal name, so let's say each of the loans is in their personal name, then one way to layer in that is to put the property in a trust and do your deal inside the trust. Okay? Because you're actually now, to an extent, layering in protection for that seller. You're actually layering protection over his personal name on that loan
Yeah.
by doing that. To explain that to them, right? And they might be much more willing to enter into some of the deals. Maybe they just want out. See, that's the other problem when you just have two. It's like, I just want out. That's like, okay, well, maybe you can cash them out, right? Get your own rental portfolio loans and cash them out if you want to. But that is a good thing to do, right? Talking about our trust. What? Another reason why we love trust is because when you find these people, using the trust helps them in a variety of ways. Not just you, it helps them too. So I would use that as a conversation piece, like I guess as a tactic, right? In order to convince them to sell or finance it directly to you.
Yeah. I've never liked that word convince in this business, but but no,
Persuade's the better word to use. Yeah.
yeah, uh, just get them on your team.
Yep.
I get what you're saying. It's just something
Yep.
about that. Maybe it's semantics. I don't know, but um, yeah, and really, now I'm going to give you another little list that we can talk about. Um, it is a high output. It is a, what's the word I'm looking for? When you when you're kind of it requires a lot of energy on your behalf to do this, but it can be a
Yes.
little bit of a gold mine. And those are, I can't talk today. Something's going on. Those are eviction records.
Yep. The eviction list. Yeah. Yep.
Evictions are public record, and but they can be a little harder to find, and it can be even harder to systematize that. And so, and I've talked about this on several occasions before, but um, this for me, the eviction, running the evictions list and building that list, it does take time and it takes a lot of effort. But you can break that down, and this is how we systematize it. We broke it down into a weekly task. So with evictions, you have to completely understand the evictions process wherever you're at in the country. That is the first thing. You have to understand, what date does eviction court happen? So we're weekly here in all of our in our county and surrounding counties. It's a weekly thing. So eviction court happens every single Thursday here. So we know that if eviction court happens on Thursday, that following Monday, when we show up to the office, we're pulling a fresh evictions list. We're pulling the addresses. We're going out and looking up the addresses of whoever owns that property, because that might not be public knowledge, or if it is, it's usually like an LLC or something. But if you go into if you pull that list, you can go out and you can cross-reference the absentee owner, who the absentee owner is of that list, and that's just something that's compiled every week. Some weeks you don't get any. Some weeks there's nothing. And it does take a little bit of your time to do it, but it's definitely a list worth exploring. Um, Particularly on that list, what you want to look for is you want to look for either individuals who might be the absentee owner of that property, or an LLC that is clearly a that or I can't even say clearly, because property managers have LLCs as well. But you're looking for an LLC that where it appears that they are self-managing their properties. Property managers, I mean, property managers is a whole different subset of folks you should be marketing to. But what I'm trying to get at is that the people who are going out and filing onesie twosie evictions. It's spotty. They show up maybe once, where you'll have maybe a property management company that submits an entire, it's like the whole docket for that day is taken up by this property management company. Like they just bunch them all up in a package and they just go to and file for eviction for multiple properties. We're looking for the individuals. We're looking for onesie twosie type of filings. So just a little insight into our system for building that evictions list. Like I said, it's a list that grows over time. You're gonna find that there's a lot of output on your behalf, but it can pay off. We've bought several properties through the evictions list, and once you have the list, it's the marketing is no different. It's just the timing has to be right. So, for example, we know that on Thursday, evictions happen here in the county. On Monday, we're pulling a list. We want a piece of mail, or we want some kind of contact with that absentee owner by the following Friday. So it gives them a week to kind of figure things out. Gives them some time to kind of stew in it, I guess, because nobody likes going through an eviction. It's awful. It's terrible. So anyway, just another little tip for targeting tired landlords.
Yep. And I'm going to give a shameless plug. I don't happen to have a QR code like I toss up in there too, but we have a particular marketing course. It's $55, and it walks you through the eviction list, like building your eviction list, how you do that. Absentee owners that you mentioned here, which is one of the most targeted lists, but all that is in there. It's property related motivations, list building mastery, property related motivations. Shameless plug, for $55, you can go start building your own evictions list step by step.
Yep.
So we have that all in there for you as well. So we're finding the people, we're targeting the list, we're meeting with the people, and we already talked about what we're doing to persuade them. Remember, these are already real estate investors. They might not be full-time real estate investors, but they understand the game to a certain extent, right? They own rental properties, which they don't want anymore, hopefully, right? So that's why we're trying to get it. And remember, when you are going through the list of how you can help them, remember, this is a win-win situation. This isn't a predatory beat you down with how bad you're managing your rental situation. That's not what we're doing here. We're going in to try to get them on our side, and maybe they can take a step back and still enjoy some passive income from being a real estate investor without the active crap, literally, that goes along with the property management. That's what we're trying to do here. And when we acquire those properties, right, we want to acquire them at the highest possible level, which is the sub 2, right? We want to take their existing loan, which hopefully has good terms. We're just going to assume that they have underlying, right? There's an underlying loan there that's solid in its terms or whatever. We want to do that on a sub 2, right? Or a wrap. We want to wrap that around there, whatever that looks like. We want to get title to the property. We want to deed it over to us. That's the highest form, right? That's the position we want to be in. But I'll just toss this out there, right? If it's a really good deal, you could take control of the properties under an agreement for deed.
Yep.
And so you can do that, and then you can do a wrap agreement for deed at the end, put an end buyer in there. But what we want to do, just so long you know, we want the highest ownership when we're taking over the properties. We want to acquire it subject to, or we want to do a straight wrap over the top of it.
Yeah, preferably. Right? Yep.
So,
yeah. However you can get legal title is going to be the best. Obviously, sub 2 is top of the list. That's pure ownership right there. You can't get any better ownership from my personal perspective. You kind of have I'm searching for the word here again because my brain's not working today.
You want full legal ownership, not just equitable ownership.
Well, there's Subject to by nature is non-recourse lending.
Yes.
You've
Yeah.
got the loan that is in somebody else's name.
Yep.
You're paying on the loan, but you also have legal title. It's like the best of all worlds, really, in investing. Now, you don't obviously we don't default on sub two loans, period. But if something really catastrophic happened, it is non-recourse from an investor perspective.
Yes. Can we just say that again? Because sometimes we gloss over that, and sometimes we take it for granted because we treat people appropriately and we do what we're say we're going to do, which is what the word for that's called integrity. And so sometimes we I think neglect to say that if you cannot, if you're taking a subject to deal, regardless of whether it's from a tired landlord or whatever it is, you're taking a subject to deal and you cannot afford to make those payments for at least a 3 to 6 month period, if you don't have that money in the bank, you shouldn't do the deal.
That's right.
If you cannot make good on your responsibility to make those monthly payments, do not do the deal.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and
It's
I
just,
also want to back up and you really glossed over this because I just playing through my head what the ultimate play is here, playing through my head,
yeah,
going back through this what we've talked about. We're not looking to acquire rental properties.
right.
We are talking to tired landlords so that we can turn around and we can get the financing from them. We're
Yeah.
making them our financiers.
Creative financing, acquiring good creative financing, right?
Yep. And then turning around and selling that deal on seller financing.
Yep.
That is our goal. You touched on it there for a second, and I was a little bit surprised. You're kind of like, yeah, well, then I'm going to turn around and sell the financing. Yeah, we're gonna put a buyer in there. But I think just like what we're talking about, a lot of people I think would infer that we're targeting tired landlords to pick up their rental property and in turn turn it and put it into our rental portfolio, which is not the case. The ultimate
No.
goal here is to put a buyer in there.
Yep. Yes. And I've had a lot of success on this. I think sometimes over the years, I've taken our tenants in our single family homes, and they are now owners, right?
Yep.
And so what you want to do, and a lot of times if you're taking an eviction list, property could be vacant. So this is a perfect time to put somebody new in there or whatever. Now, don't forget too that if you're acquiring 3 or 4 properties from tired landlords on the eviction list, you're going to need to spend some money on the property making it better, right?
Yeah.
So don't forget that there's that piece of that too. Like you have to do improvements so that you can get an end buyer in there. You might want to do improvements a little bit better than the rent ready improvements. Maybe not, just depends. But in there to get that end buyer, our end buyer in there. But maybe the tenant's in place, right? And maybe it's performing. Go to the tenant and make them an owner.
Yeah.
And we want to do that on contract for deed, agreement for deed, because we retain ownership of the property. So we want to acquire the property, deed it to us, and then we want to turn around and sell or finance it on agreement for deed because we still have the highest level of control and ownership of the property. That's the model. Now, maybe you change that. Maybe you can wrap on the other side of it too, if that's what you want to do. But we're just saying, what's the ideal situation? That's the ideal sub to empire situation.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. On the what we're calling a wrap can be an agreement for deed, or it can be a true mortgage wrap. But I have seen questions, people asking about, well, if I buy a property on agreement for deed or contract for deed, how am I going to sell it? Well,
Mm-hmm.
you do the exact same thing. You have equitable ownership of that property. You can sell that property as well on contract for deed.
Yep.
You can create a whole new contract for deed. I mean, if you're under contract with your seller, you have those set of terms. You turn around and sell it on contract for deed to your buyer.
Yep.
and you have a total, obviously you build your terms in so that you cash flow and that you have, you get
Yep.
paid those three ways that we always talk about.
Yeah.
It's so just to dispel any kind of hearsay or myths or worry about, if you own equitable ownership in a property via contract for deed, yes, you can sell that property on the other side, on your sell side, on contract for deed as
Yeah.
well. You
You
don't
can
have
wrap.
to go
Yeah.
rent.
It just like wrapping a mortgage, right? You can put a note and a deed of trust on top of each other, right? Or a mortgage on top of each other, the wrap mortgage. You can wrap an agreement for deed just like that. What you can't do is create a mortgage document. If you acquire it under agreement for deed, you do not have the legal ability to then mortgage it off or do a deed of trust on the other side, right? You have to have legal ownership to do that.
Yep. Yeah.
So
That's a
just
really
want to
good
clear
point.
that. That seems obvious, but but just to clarify that.
Yeah. Yeah. I left that out. So I mean,
Yeah.
if if I can leave it out, or not think of that, then I'm sure a lot of other people think the same way. But yeah, you're 100% correct. You have to have legal ownership to be able uh, to sell it with legal
Yes.
legal title.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
In order to retitle it, to transfer the title, the deed, to transfer ownership, you have to have full legal title to
yeah.
transfer ownership. And
Yeah.
I just did, and then just say, well, wrap contract for deed. What's the? It's not dissimilar to a sublease. So a lot of people, especially in major metropolitan cities, they will enter into a lease agreement with somebody and then make sure that they can sublease it. And then they just write a new lease to the person that they find at a higher rate, and they're cash flowing the difference, especially in rent controlled areas. They're cash flowing the difference for all of that too.
Yep.
So right, that's it's the same scenario
Excellent.
in there. And I know it works because I'm doing it right now on a property. So I know it works.
Yeah. I
So
do want to back up um, just a little bit and talk about, I guess, some of the reasons why, or some of the selling points that you might have when you're talking to a tired landlord. And obviously, the glaring ones are uh, the reasons for them getting out of this business are that made them a tired landlord are the things like the management side of it, and the repairs, and all the crap that goes along with being a landlord. But so that's kind of like the negative side of things. One of the major selling points on kind of converting a tired landlord is capital gains. If and they're not going to get they're not going to they'll experience capital gains on any sale. So whether if they sell the property to you via subject to, even though their name is still on the loan, that is a taxable event right there. So if they bought it for 125,000 and they sold it to you via sub two, and maybe you put some cash into that deal to kind of sweeten the deal up for the seller, whatever they sold that for, let's say it's 107, that you bought it for 175, but you took over, they bought it at 125. Well, there's a $50,000 capital gain there. And this capital gain does count because this is an investment property. This is not their personal home. So that completely wipes out their ability to not have that taxable event because it's not their personal property. So one of the great things about creative finance is we can build in terms for handling this taxable event. Mainly, if capital gains is a concern for the seller, what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and build in terms to pay that to make that difference, that the difference between the 125 that they bought it for and the 175 they sold it for, that $50,000 difference, we're going to try and build terms to pay that back over time to actually reduce or delay their capital gain, so they're not just hit all at one time with this big tax bill. I don't know what the taxes would be on 50 grand. I can't imagine it would be that much, but It's a concern for people. In fact,
20%, 20% capital gains. Yeah.
So, I mean, it could hurt, but this is a great thing about creative finance, and it's also a great thing when you're talking to someone who has experience, like a landlord, in this world where the home ownership rule, capital gains rule, I forgot what it's called right now, where it does matter. It hits them directly in the pocketbook. So it's just a massive upside to seller financing and creative financing.
Yes. So let's go into a little more detail to do that. So that's a great example. So that $50,000, you're going to ask the seller to take back on a second note, right? You're going to take it subject to the first mortgage, and then you're going to ask them to take it back so that you can avoid the capital gains. And then the only thing they claim income-wise is the interest.
Mm-hmm.
The interest, not the principal repayment. The interest is your income off of that.
Yeah.
And what happens so let's say that when it was all said and done, this rental property was cash flowing $360 a month for them. What happens if that principal only 0% second that you create for that seller to take back has a $360 a month payment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So show them, and this is good. I try to stress this too on the coaching calls. Show them, create the amortization schedule, and show them what they will make as the bank. Right?
Yeah. Key.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only is it transparent, but it's also these folks don't really recognize, they don't understand. Everyone's looking for that big cash infusion, but they don't understand that, on that $50,000, for example, over the course of, let's say it's 15 years. I don't know. I don't have an amortization table up in front of me, but I can imagine they would probably make at least triple on that $50,000 over the course over time than they would if they just took the 50K in cash. It's, sometimes they just need the cash, period. Sometimes they're in a spot where they just need it, which is fine. What we're going to do is, our strategy is going to be, we're going to go out and bring in a private lender. They're going to give us the 50K. We're going to pay the seller off. We now own the property. Now we just have, we have two notes, of the large underlying note on a subject to deal or the seller finance deal. And we have another note that we need to, pay off through the cash flow. It's real simple. The cleaner way to do this, if you can get the terms, is to go ahead and just have one note, have the seller give you legal title through a wrap if they have a mortgage on it. Give you legal title, you make that payment directly to them. Super clean. Come tax season, it's really, really clean, and you don't have to go out and borrow, whatever it is the shortcoming is that you need to get the deal closed.
Yeah.
Very
just wrap it. Yeah, wrap it. So that they don't have to take back a second. They're giving you, right? They're giving you the note all in one, and you're putting it around the subject to the existing financing. Yeah.
Right. Now, I will say, this is a personal preference regarding that. If I'm going to take a property on a wrap, generally speaking, and there's an underlying loan, generally speaking, I like to make this a little bit of a hassle, but I like to make the underlying loan payment separate from what I owe the seller on what they're carrying back for us. I just like to do that because if the seller gets into some kind of financial trouble, what is the first thing they're going to stop paying on? Mm-hmm. Something that they no longer own, or they, so it's just like a little hedge. Doesn't happen all the time, but it's security for me knowing that underlying loan is being paid. It's just how I feel about it. You don't have to do it. It just feels better to me to make sure that, because if he stops paying that, I'm I'm really screwed. They're just going to come
Yep.
take the house back. So,
Yep.
all right, what else we got here?
I think that's good. So we covered how, like, the the sub two empire ideal model, right? We acquire it over here. We seller finance it. We creatively acquire it over here by turning the landlord into our seller finance person, and then we turn around and seller finance it to an end buyer, right? So we do that over here on deed of trust or mortgage, and we do that over here on a contract for deed because we retain the highest form of legal ownership throughout that process and control the property. Right? If you want, it's all about control. You can control the property, acquiring it with a contract for deed. That is true, but it's not the highest form of ownership, which is what you want when you acquire anything.
Yep.
So
Yep.
just it's just the deal. It's not like, and I think you have. I've not done this in a while. I did actually my mom and dad's property I got on a lease with option, but not a contract for deed per se. I haven't. Have you acquired properties just because the deal was so good, but they didn't want to, do the straight mortgage or whatever? Have you acquired it on a contract for deed and then turned around and did, we'll call it the sandwich contract for deed, or wrap contract for deed over the top of it?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It works. We have this hierarchy that we follow, and um, obviously you've touched on it already. Sub two, highest form of ownership you can have. It's the safest. Uh, it's generally very, very clean. Then we have the wrap, or the pure seller finance, meaning the note and the deed of trust or mortgage. Um, then we have agreement for deed, which is just below that, which is going to be, it's still ownership, but it's only equitable ownership. And then if all else fails, this is the way I look at this. If all else fails and you still want to control the property, you still know you can cash flow that property. Now you can't sell it this way, obviously, but that is to lease. Make sure you get the option to purchase on that property. So you're gonna lease it with the option to purchase it. What that does for you is that option contract locks in a purchase price for you from the day that you sign it. And when that option contract runs out, generally speaking, these places are going to appreciate in value. So you've locked in a lower price on that property, usually, unless it's in an area that just doesn't appreciate. Excuse me. So, and then what you can do is you can turn around, you can do exactly the same thing that we're doing with these other forms of ownership. And that is, you can sublet that property out with an option, by the way, to buy it.
Yep. Yep.
And it can work. It can be very hairy. And I did do this in the very beginning when I first got into these rental properties. I was doing things very similar to that. I will tell you, it didn't turn out that well for me. That's the reason I got into something too, and seller financing things. Finding end buyers for these things. It just didn't. Ultimately, I was just another landlord. I was still a landlord, and it was still a pain in the butt. Still having to take phone calls. I thought it would be like, oh boy, the person I'm subleasing this to is really going to take care of this property. Didn't turn out to be that way. And in fact, on on at least one occasion, and this is why this is the very last way to take control of a property. That's why it's on my list as the lowest form of control, is because if if the tenant that you put into that property, tears that property up, or they vacate early and now you've got a vacant property, ultimately your seller, who you have signed an option contract with, is responsible for that property. They're legally responsible still for that property. This is why I'd much rather have equitable or legal title to the property. Did that make sense?
Yes.
If you're in a lease, you can break that lease. You're going to lose whatever you have in that lease. But ultimately, it does not protect your seller, because if for some reason your tenant that you're subleasing to tears up that property, and you may have promised that you're going to fix the property back up and sublease it back out. But if something happens, what I'm trying to get at is ultimately it does not protect your seller. That's why we'd rather have them. I would much rather have a property on agreement for deed than a lease option, because it
For
protects
sure.
the
Yep.
seller. It keeps
Yep.
the seller, um, or it adds a layer of protection. And by the way, as you go from lease option to agreement for deed to a note and a deed of trust or mortgage and sub two, as you go up that ladder, there's less and less risk on the seller.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, another good selling point, another good reason to say, hey, I can lease it from you. It's not going to protect you. I can lease it from you, but with the understanding that I'm going to sublease it out, but that's not going to protect you. If we have a legally binding agreement where I have equitable ownership, I am going to be responsible for that property. So it's just another little, like I said, it's just another little selling point or another pitch, I guess, that you can throw in there just to let them know you're kind of looking out for them.
Yep. And if all of that sounded confusing and it made your head hurt, then just scan the QR code and partner with us. And that's why we're here. You come on our coaching calls, we'll go over the deals with you. We'll help you hand in hand to acquire the properties, right? To market. Well, we have whole marketing courses in there that would be available to you, right? So you market to the people. Now, once you get the lead or you get the purchase agreement, right? Or maybe you don't even know how to do that, right? We'll start from there and go all the way through the process. So that's what our partner program is all about.
Yep. All right. You got anything else?
I think that'll do it for this week. I guess we'll just say have a great week, and we'll see you next Friday.